God bless America. Hello, everybody. I am the Talk Radio Protege. This is the Protege program in celebration of being back from the vacation that I took over the last week. I thought that it would be a good idea to recap the news of the last week as I have observed in my brief time of returning home. And we will begin with this story. Spoiler alert, I will not be providing a bunch of opinion. Where I do, I think it will be obvious. Um, but I'll try to let you know when I'm sharing my opinion rather than just the facts as they have played out over last week's events. There's a lot of things to get through, so let's get started with this story. My headline: New York Times hires racist Sarah Jeong. From the National Review, newest member of the New York Times editorial board has history of racist tweets. An announcement was made Wednesday that Sarah Jeong, who has written for numerous publications and spoken at Harvard Law School, would be joining the New York Times editorial team. Shortly after, numerous tweets by Jeong disparaging whites and men, or the combination thereof, were republished, dug up, or brought to light, whatever you want to say. A backlash ensued against Jeong, forcing responses by the mainstream media. Most outlets, including the New York Times and Jeong herself, defended her actions. Some outlets cited the progressive definition of racism, which is prejudice plus power, and Jeong's minority status, saying that it is impossible for Jeong as a minority to be racist. Others justified Jeong's behavior, calling it quote-unquote counter-trolling. I'd like to point out that more than one apolitical persons have been socially crucified for describing racism. See, for instance, Papa John and Netflix executive Jonathan Friedland, while using the N-word. So, unless the N-word is so evil that it contaminates all speakers with racism, an argument that the left is not making, I will point out, then the context of Jeong's racism is not a legitimate defense according to the logic of the left. So, some have postulated that the left is taking this opportunity to abandon the social outrage mob tactic. I don't think that this is going to discourage the left from using the social outrage mob to try and influence politics or social change in the future. I think they're just abandoning it for the sake of this is their team that's getting what they think is a good player. So they're throwing their morality out the window, saying we're just going to do whatever we want, and the rest of you can pound sand. The next story that I want to look at comes from a Trump rally that was held in Montana on Thursday. Thursday night, President Trump held a rally in Montana to campaign for Senate candidate Matt Rosendale. At this rally, one CNN employee, who will be named shortly, was mercilessly heckled by the crowd. Some flipped him off, some booed, some chanted, CNN sucks. And the mainstream media wasted no time in decrying this happening. In particular, CNN's Simone Sanders conflated heckling with threatening in a panel discussion after the rally. I would like to point out here that if heckling is threatening, then the now named CNN employee who was heckled at this Trump rally, Jim Acosta, should be in jail for threatening a president. As I'm sure many of you know, Jim Acosta's favorite strategy when trying to ask questions of the president or the White House press secretary, anybody, is heckle, 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 heckle. If he doesn't get asked for his question, then he says his question anyway, which I think is the definition of heckling. The Washington Post, in somewhat related news, the Washington Post published a point-by-point fact check of the president's speech, claiming 76% of his statements were false, misleading, or lacking evidence. Now, Steven Crowder published a video with Lee Doran breaking down how Washington Post got to that number, and that video should be in my liked video playlist on my channel. It breaks down exactly how the Washington Post decided that 76% of the claims were false, misleading, or lacking evidence. Spoiler alert, some of that means that they are taking a statement that the president made, then choosing the least, what's the word that I'm looking for? I've said this phrase before, um, the least charitable interpretation of the statement and saying that is the version that is false, rather than taking what I think most reasonable people would think that Trump was saying, hearing that statement. They're not even taking what is a moderately charitable interpretation of a statement and then deciding if that is factual or not. They're taking the least charitable version of the statement. Sometimes it's not even what he said, and then deciding if that is false, misleading, or lacking evidence. Some statements that Trump made, they're taking and saying, well, there's some extra context or there's some extra tidbits that Trump didn't say, therefore his statement is lacking evidence or misleading. So just a very short version of how the Washington Post got to 76% of claims. Go watch Steven Crowder's video. It does a lot better job than I am going to do here in this one. In other news, very good news, as a matter of fact, Tommy Robinson, who I'm sure you'll remember back in May, was jailed for contempt of court after broadcasting a tirade on Facebook, says the telegraph.co.uk. Now, at this time, Tommy Robinson was reporting on a trial that was taking place in Britain, and he was sentenced to 13 months in particular to prison for contempt of court. As an aside, Britain takes a different approach to a fair trial than the U.S. While the U.S. attempts to isolate a jury to make sure that the trial is fair, Britain attempts to isolate the entire trial. So people are not allowed to see or comment on the trial as part of isolating the trial. And this is what Tommy Robinson was doing when he was broadcasting to Facebook, and that's why he was arrested and tried and convicted for contempt of court. Robinson reported details, including the defendant's names and charges that were made against him using his Facebook account, and a British appellate court ruled last week that Robinson's conviction was flawed as a result of proceedings moving too quickly. And you can see that sentence from this story from abc.net.au right here. Now, the report that was put out by the appellate court goes into more details than this. The claim was made by another YouTube commenter that I watch sometimes for news, Sargon of Akkad, that the report from the appellate court said that the judge was biased against Tommy Robinson. I'm not going to spend a whole lot more time on that because I'm not an expert in this thing, and this is another news story that has been reported over and over and over again in the last few days because so many people are celebrating this man's release. The last story that I want to talk about comes from the weekend. Patriot Prayer, whose early July rally in Portland was attacked by Antifa, held another rally in Portland just over the weekend, on Sunday actually. This time, the police successfully prevented any rioting, and according to some in the media, it was by targeting exclusively Antifa. Now, you may remember that Patriot Prayer had a permit to march and rally last month, and Antifa did not. I cannot confirm that this scenario repeated itself on Sunday, but, and this is me editorializing a little bit, I wouldn't be surprised if this was the same scenario repeating itself, where the Patriot Prayer has a permit to rally in Portland and their counter-protesters have none. This time around, police targeted Antifa when the event became too tense. This seems like the just outcome to me, as Antifa instigated the violence in the previous rally. I showed you the footage, if I remember correctly, of the moment when that Patriot Prayer rally turned into a riot, and it was when Antifa had thrown an explosive device into the midst of the Patriot Prayer ralliers. Now, some on the left don't think that this is the case. They see Patriot Prayer as the violent one, specifically these two gentlemen from the Huffington and Puffington Post. Their headline, "Violent Proto-Fascists Came to Portland. The Police Went After the Anti-Fascists." Now, Patriot Prayer are the quote-unquote proto-fascists, and just in case you're not sure what a proto-fascist is, I went ahead and looked up what the meaning of the prefix proto, and it just means the first kind of. So Christopher Mathias and Andy Campbell of the Huffington and Puffington Post think that Patriot Prayer is an early form of fascism. They think that American conservatives is early fascism. Just let that sink in for a few moments. Patriot Prayer is only violent insofar as they fought against people that were attacking them. At least if you have seen the footage of the original or the earlier rally in Portland where Patriot Prayer clashed with Antifa. It was because of Antifa that the rally turned violent. I mean, this would be like calling schools violent because shootings happened there. I mean, it makes no sense. When violent people bring violence to your gathering place, that doesn't make you violent. That makes them violent. And if you respond with violence, that also does not make you violent. That makes you self-defensive. There was a church that was attacked in Texas a while back. It was a few months ago, and one person that lived near the church used a firearm to shoot and kill the person that had attacked the church. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that that man, Stephen Williford was his name, is a violent person. But he used violence to stop a violent individual. That doesn't make Stephen Williford violent. That means that he was thrust into a violent situation where he felt that he needed to use violence to de-escalate the situation. People that use violence to de-escalate an escalated situation are not violent people. I'm sure that on a day-to-day basis, these police officers do not just go home and throw violence around as if it's cotton candy. But these police officers are charged as part of their job to use violence to de-escalate tense situations. And that's exactly what they did in Portland. On the contrary, in the previous Portland rally, the police had allowed Patriot Prayer and Antifa to crash together and fight each other. This time around, that was not done, and you have people like these two gentlemen over at the Washington Compost, or the Huffington Puffington Compost, complaining that the police were only violent against the quote-unquote anti-fascists. Now, this concludes my recap and brief opinions on last week's news. If you want more of my opinion on any of these events, let me know in the comment section down below. Also, please let me know what your thoughts are about each of these events, what you think of them. If you have any more information, I would greatly appreciate your input. Thanks again so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Hit subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss future videos. I hope that you'll come back and join me next time. Until then, good night and God bless.